If you have an idea for an app, you can turn it into reality with Replit. I used Replit to create prompt snips. This is a website where you can share your prompts for AI with other users. And it only took me an hour or two to build my app. To do it, I took out a Replit premium subscription. That cost me $25 per month. And I used up pretty much all of my monthly credits to build prompt snips, which you can visit at promptsnips.com. And I'm going to walk you through exactly how I did it inside of Replit. Replit works pretty much the same as any AI agent you've used. Once you've taken out a subscription, whether it's free or paid, you get access to a chat interface. And here you can start to describe the app or site that you want to build. So it's good for building web apps, data apps, games, and also just general web projects. Now, if you have more chops as a developer, you can head over to Explore Replit and click on Developer Frameworks. And it'll give you a couple of different ideas for frameworks and for languages that you can use for your websites and also for your different projects. And if you want to use any one of these, you just simply click on the framework and then select Remix. Now, like I said, I wouldn't describe myself as a developer. So I did this the old-fashioned way. Basically, I wrote up a product requirements document and I used this to describe what I wanted Replit to create for me. I told Replit that I wanted to create a tool for sharing access to AI prompts. And Replit helped me create a PRD or product requirements document. Now I wanted to get some third-party feedback on my PRD. So I headed over to ChatGPT and I pasted in the Replit output and asked it to evaluate it. And ChatGPT gave me a number of changes that I could make to this product requirements document. Then I headed back over to Replit and pasted in the new version. And it started to build prompt snips for me. Now I spent about an hour or two going backwards and forwards working on various iterations of prompt snips. Basically, Replit can work in the background when you're doing other projects. And at any point you can also roll back your app if it's made some changes that you don't like, or perhaps if it's gone down a rabbit hole. Replit is pretty easy to use. Basically, on the left hand side of the screen, you get access to Agent. And here is where you're going to select Build if you want Replit to make changes to your code. Select Plan if you want to ask Replit questions or plan your work, kind of like what I did with ChatGPT. And Edit if you want to modify specific elements in your project. On the right hand side of the screen, you can actually see a live preview of what your project looks like. But if you want to dive in a little bit further because you got some good developer skills, you can select Console to see any potential errors. And you can also select Deployments to deploy your app. Now on the far left hand side of the screen, you can actually go in and edit specific files of your projects. So this was a little bit different to some of the other vibe coding apps that I've tried. To show you what I mean, if I clicked on SRC and if I click on Footer, I can see all of the text and stylings that appear on the footer of my app. And this is good basically if I want to make changes to the footer myself rather than using up my credits or if I find AI a little bit slow. Similarly, if I click on Index, I can see what appears on the home page. And if I click on Header, I can customize what appears on the header. So I found this was quite good because sometimes I like to go in and I like to copy, edit or change elements of my apps and vibe coding projects without necessarily relying on AI. As you can see from this conversation with Replit, I went backwards and forwards a few different times trying to fix and troubleshoot issues in my vibe coding projects. And I clicked rollback a couple of times when I didn't like the direction Replit was going in. Using Replit, I was basically able to iterate my project in real time using the build mode. Now, when I got a version of prompt snips that I was somewhat happy with, I took a screenshot and I headed over to ChatGPT. And I pasted it into ChatGPT and I asked it for feedback. And it suggested a number of UX improvements and it also suggested some design and style improvements as well. Then I went back over to Replit and I pasted in some of these changes, suggestions and fixes. So as an example, I called out this particular feature, which I'll show you in a few moments. And I said the styling is awful, review it. And I also suggested some features and additions that we could work into promptsnips.com as well. Basically, I went backwards and forwards between Replit and ChatGPT, iterating on the design, features, and functionality. Now, clearly you can do this directly inside of Replit as well. If you're going to do it that way, I would suggest just going to plan mode and asking Replit for feedback on your project. And of course, at any point, if you want to, you can select rollback here to revert changes, or you can select changes to view the changes Replit has made to the code and work on each one of these files or components yourself as well. Again, because I'm not a coder, I did more rely on visual outputs and on ChatGPT and on making some manual edits myself. Now I want this tool to get a little bit of traction, so I tried to include some virality and share options. So as an example, when I select Get Image, there's an option to share on X and LinkedIn. And I asked Replit, is there any way to amend the share on X or LinkedIn buttons so it actually has the image? And Replit told me that while it could download the image to use a user's desktop, it wasn't actually possible to pre-populate X and LinkedIn with the image in question. So that's just one example of how Replit helped me figure out what I could and couldn't do with this tool. Now, as you can see, we went backwards and forwards, troubleshooting some development issues, improving the design of different parts of prompt snips, and also just making general changes to the branding and look and feel of the site. And when I got stuck, I would basically just go back to ChatGPT and I would ask it a couple of questions about the look and feel, about the features, and then go back to Replit and iterate it. It was kind of like having two developers working together that I was able to manage. Once you get your app to a place that you're happy with, it's time to deploy it. And there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. So perhaps the easiest and cheapest way to do it is just to deploy it inside of Render. And then you will get a render link that you can share with other people. Simply click on deploy and it will suggest the best option for you. And then if you want, you can connect your custom domain directly to Replit. Another option, and this is the direction I went in, is to deploy your project to GitHub. So simply click on all tools and then navigate to Git. And now you have version control for your app. Now, if you're confused about how GitHub works for your vibe coding projects, like I was a few months ago, I have some videos on the channel where I walk through what to do. But if you get stuck, you can just ask Replit questions. And this was one of the reasons why I liked it. So simply change from build mode, which is what you use for your coding projects, to plan, and then ask it questions. Questions like this one: how do I repush to GitHub? And Replit will walk you through step by step what you need to do and even give you the commands that you can input. Now for my particular vibe coding project, I connected my GitHub repository to Render. Render isn't a vibe coding app. It's actually a place, or should I say a service, that you can use for hosting your apps. It's not necessary to have a Render subscription, but I use Render for some of my vibe coding projects. So I connected Render to GitHub and I used Replit to figure out how to get them all to work together. So you can see here I got stuck on setting up a database inside of Render. And again, Replit acted like a developer and walked me through how I could fix the database issues inside of Render. Let me show you how prompt snips works. So firstly, I'm going to paste in my content into prompt snips. So this is basically the AI prompt that I'd use for ChatGPT. And that's all I need to do. I can click shareable link and just simply share this prompt with other people. However, I also have a section for pasting in the response from AI. And not only that, but I can copy the link that I get from ChatGPT and I can paste in the source link as well. I can also add some custom tags and even a title if I want, and I can set this to public, unlisted, or private. And this is all possible because I created a database with Replit. Then I'll get a shareable link that I can use or give to other people. So if I select copy link and open up the link, you can see that I get instant access to the prompt as well as the output. I also get an embeddable version that I can embed as an iframe or a script on my website or blog. I also have access to Get Image. So this is basically a card that I can share on X or LinkedIn, or I can download a PNG version to my desktop. Now I wouldn't have been able to create any of this myself without Replit. There are also options for just simply copying the text to my clipboard and for opening it up directly inside of ChatGPT or in Claude as well. It's basically a simple bare bones app for people who want to paste AI prompts, get a link and share with other people. And you can see here I can browse my past pastes as well at the bottom of the screen. It took me about maybe 60 to 90 minutes to build this with Replit. Then I made a couple of changes myself and I spent about 20 or 30 minutes fixing the database and deploying it. So the whole thing took about 120 minutes maybe, and it cost me a little less than $25. If I wanted to do something like this with a developer, I probably would have spent a couple of $100. What I like about Replit is it's surprisingly easy to use. So you have your chat interface, which you'll be familiar with from ChatGPT and Claude. You can also select apps to access all of your previous apps. So you can see here I've built a number of different apps with Replit. You can select usage at any time to see how much of your credits you've used. Now I didn't go over the $25 for this per month for this particular app, but if you're building a couple of apps, you probably will eat into your credits and you will have to spend a little bit more. So you can see here I used 15 of the $25 for this particular app. If you have more development shops, you can of course browse developer frameworks, and there is some learning and documentation that you can browse through as well. Now, if you have vibe coded with another app, you can also import your code from GitHub or from Figma, from Bolt or from Lovable, and work on it directly inside of Replit. One thing I really liked about Replit versus some of the other vibe coding apps I've tried is you really get granular control over your code and also over the app. In other words, it didn't feel like it was locked in. That's because I was basically able to navigate to files and go into any of the files related to my vibe coding project. So I was able to edit and review this code and the text and copy it myself without necessarily relying on AI to fix it and then eating into all of my credits. And of course, I could just simply export all of this code to my desktop and use it with another app if I wanted as well. So I'm working on a number of different apps at the moment inside of Replit. So I'm working on one that will help me see the earnings dates for some stocks that I own. And this will basically be an app that I will use on my desktop. I'm also creating an app that will act as a type of business directory for my local newsletter project, which I profile elsewhere on the channel. And I'm also crafting an app which will help end users write better prompts for AI. So the reason why I'm showing you this is if you have an idea for an app of any type and you know how to describe it, you don't necessarily need code to create it. And then you can ask Replit to iterate its features and functionality. So don't be afraid to take screenshots of your app or to take screenshots of bits of code that you get stuck in or errors, and either paste them into Replit and ask it questions about what's gone wrong, or paste it into another AI tool like ChatGPT and ask it for feedback and suggestions. That said, Replit is surprisingly powerful, and at $25 per month, you can probably accomplish quite a lot. Are you using Replit? Do you have questions about it? Let me know in the comments section below this video.